The rain hammered against the makeshift medical tent like angry fists, each drop carrying the bitter cold of Kepler. 442b's endless winter. Corporal Marcus Chun wiped the condensation from his breath off his medical scanner as he organized his dwindling supply of antibiotics. 3 months into the peacekeeping mission on this frozen hell of a planet, and he was already running low on everything that mattered. Outside, the sounds of the refugee camp echoed through the storm. Thousands of displaced beings from a dozen different species had fled here after the Hegemony War ended, seeking shelter and medical aid from the human peacekeeping force. Marcus had seen it all in his 2 years as a field medic. Species with scales that changed color with their emotions, crystalline beings that communicated through harmonic frequencies, gaseous entities that required specialized containment suits. But nothing had prepared him for the call that came through his comm unit at 0300 hours. Medic to Sector 7 immediately, crackled the voice of Sergeant Rodriguez. We got something unusual. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and trudged through the mud toward the outer perimeter of the camp. Sector 7 was where they housed the more exotic refugees, beings whose biology was so alien that standard protocols didn't apply. As he approached the designated shelter, a crude structure made from salvaged ship hulls and thermal blankets, he could hear something that made his blood run cold. It was a sound like no creature should make, a deep, resonating moan that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Mixed with it was a chittering, almost musical quality that spoke of intelligence, of suffering that went beyond mere physical pain. What exactly am I looking at here, Sergeant? Marcus asked as Rodriguez led him to a reinforced observation window. Showed up 3 days ago, Rodriguez replied, his weathered face grim. Bioscanners can't make heads or tails of it. Command wanted to quarantine it indefinitely, but he paused, looking uncomfortable. Listen for yourself. Document. Through the reinforced glass, Marcus saw something that defied easy description. The creature was roughly 15 feet long, with a serpentine body covered in what looked like overlapping plates of dark chitin. But these weren't the dull, lifeless scales of a reptile. They seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, reflecting the dim emergency lighting in patterns that hurt to look at directly. 6 limbs extended from its torso, each ending in appendages that were part hand, part claw, and part something else entirely. But it was the creature's condition that made Marcus's medical training kick into overdrive. The being was clearly in distress, its entire body racked with violent tremors. The metallic plates that covered its hide had lost their luster, taking on a sickly gray pallor. Thick, dark fluid oozed from between the scales, pooling on the floor of its enclosure. Most disturbing of all were the sounds it made. Not random animal noises, but what sounded almost like words, spoken in a language that predated human civilization. How long has it been like this? Marcus asked, already running preliminary scans through the observation port. Started yesterday morning. Whatever it is, it's getting worse. The thing hasn't eaten or drunk anything since it arrived. Our xenobiology specialist thinks it might be some kind of hibernation sickness, but she's never seen anything like it. Marcus watched as the creature tried to lift what might have been its head, a triangular structure that seemed to blend seamlessly into its neck. For a moment, he thought he saw something that looked disturbingly like eyes, not the simple photoreceptors of most animals, but complex organs that seemed to hold intelligence, even awareness. The creature looked directly at him through the glass, and Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's climate. I need to go in there, he said. Rodriguez shook his head immediately. Absolutely not. We don't know what kind of pathogens this thing might be carrying, or if it's dangerous. Command's orders are strict observation only. Look at it, Sergeant. That's not hibernation sickness. I've seen enough battlefield trauma to recognize shock when I see it, even in something that alien. If we don't act soon, it's going to die. The 2 men stood in silence for a moment, listening to the creature's labored breathing. Finally, Rodriguez sighed. What do you need? Marcus was already pulling up biological data on his scanner. Full environmental suit, portable life support, and clearance to use my emergency medical protocols. I'm treating this as a standard triage situation until proven otherwise. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood at the airlock leading into the creature's enclosure, his hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to attempt. His medical scanner had detected elevated stress hormones, signs of severe dehydration, and what his equipment interpreted as systemic infection, though he had no way of knowing if his human-designed instruments could accurately read alien physiology. As the airlock cycled, Marcus found himself thinking about the oath he'd taken when he'd enlisted as a field medic, to preserve life wherever possible, regardless of species, politics, or personal risk. He'd applied that principle to enemy combatants during the war, to refugees who spoke no human languages, even to artificial intelligences that had been damaged in combat. This was just another patient, he told himself, albeit one unlike any he'd encountered before. The creature's enclosure was larger than it had appeared from outside, with a sandy floor and several heat sources that had been positioned to try to make the environment comfortable for a being of unknown origin. The smell hit him immediately, not unpleasant, exactly, but utterly alien. It reminded him somehow of ozone and copper with an underlying sweetness that might have been natural pheromones. The creature lay coiled in the center of the space, its breathing shallow and irregular. Up close, Marcus could see details that the observation cameras had missed. The plates that covered its body weren't chitin after all, but something more like living metal, with a surface that seemed to ripple in response to the creature's emotional state. Along what he assumed was its spine, a series of bioluminescent organs pulsed weakly, their light fading with each breath. As Marcus approached, the creature's head turned toward him with obvious effort. Those eyes, and they were definitely eyes, focused on him with startling clarity. For a moment, neither being moved. Then, the creature made a sound, softer than before, that sounded almost like a question. "Easy there," Marcus said quietly, not sure if the being could understand him, but hoping his tone would convey peaceful intent. "I'm here to help." He activated his medical scanner and began taking detailed readings. What he found confirmed his worst fears. The creature was dying. Its core temperature was dropping steadily. Its circulatory system was failing, and the infection markers his scanner detected were off the charts. Whatever was wrong with it, time was running out. Marcus pulled out his emergency medical kit and began laying out supplies. Standard antibiotics, pain relievers, hydration solutions, all designed for human or near-human physiology. Using them on something this alien was like trying to perform surgery with kitchen utensils, but it was all he had. The creature watched him work with those disturbingly intelligent eyes. When Marcus approached with a portable 4-unit, it actually extended one of its limbs toward him, the appendage ending in something that might have been a wrist. The gesture was so clearly voluntary, so obviously cooperative, that Marcus felt a chill of recognition. This wasn't just an animal. It was a person trapped in a body that no human medical training could adequately help. "All right," Marcus muttered, more to himself than to his patient. "Let's see if human medicine works on whatever you are." He started with the most basic intervention, hydration. The 4 went in easier than he'd expected, the creature's flesh yielding to the needle with minimal resistance. As the saline solution began to flow, Marcus watched for any signs of adverse reaction. Instead, he saw immediate improvement. The creature's breathing became less labored, and some of the gray pallor began to fade from its metallic skin. Encouraged, Marcus prepared his next intervention. The antibiotic cocktail he carried was broad-spectrum, designed to work against the most common battlefield infections. It was a calculated risk, but the alternative was watching this being die while he stood by helplessly. As the medication entered the creature's system, Marcus began to notice something extraordinary. The bioluminescent organs along its spine began to pulse more strongly, shifting from a sickly yellow to a warm blue-white. The metallic plates that covered its body started to regain their luster, and the fluid that had been oozing from between the scales gradually stopped flowing. But most remarkable of all was what happened when the creature tried to speak. What had been painful, wordless moaning began to take on structure, rhythm, meaning. Marcus couldn't understand the language, but He recognized the cadence of communication, of intelligence asserting itself over animal suffering. The creature's recovery wasn't complete. It would take time for the medications to take full effect, but the improvement was undeniable. As Marcus packed up his equipment, the being fixed him with those alien eyes and made a series of sounds that, while incomprehensible, were clearly deliberate. There was a musical quality to them, a harmony that suggested complex thought patterns. "You're welcome," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure if gratitude was what he was hearing. As he prepared to leave the enclosure, the creature did something that would haunt his dreams for years to come. It raised one of its 6 limbs in what was unmistakably a gesture of farewell. Not the instinctive response of an animal, but the conscious action of a being that understood courtesy, that recognized the gift it had been given. Marcus left the enclosure with his mind reeling. Whatever that creature was, it wasn't just another refugee. The intelligence he'd witnessed, the deliberate nature of its communications, the way it had cooperated with his medical procedures, all of it pointed to something far more significant than a simple first contact scenario. As he walked back through the storm toward his quarters, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just participated in something that would change everything. He'd save a life today, just as he'd done hundreds of times before. But this time, he had the disturbing suspicion that the life he'd saved might one day save humanity in return. Marcus woke to the sound of his comm unit buzzing insistently beside his cot. After the events of the previous night, he'd barely managed 3 hours of sleep, his dreams filled with images of metallic scales and impossibly intelligent eyes. The timestamp on his unit showed 0630 hours, early, even by military standards. "Chun here," he mumbled into the device. "Doc, you need to get to Sector 7 right now," came Rodriguez's voice, but there was something different about it. Where yesterday the sergeant had sounded grim and worried, now there was an edge of barely controlled excitement. "And bring everything. Full medical kit, scanning equipment, the works." "What's the situation?" Marcus asked, already pulling on his uniform. "That's the thing, document. I'm not entirely sure. You're just going to have to see it for yourself." The walk to Sector 7 felt different in the pale light of dawn. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the refugee camp shrouded in an eerie mist that rose from the warming ground. As Marcus approached the observation post, he could see that a small crowd had gathered, not just military personnel, but several of the camp scientists and even a few representatives from other species. Dr. Sarah Kim, the expedition's leading xenobiologist, spotted him first. Her normally composed demeanor had given way to something approaching wonder. "Marcus, thank God you're here. What exactly did you do to that creature yesterday?" "Standard medical intervention," Marcus replied, confused by the urgency in her voice. "4 fluids, broad-spectrum antibiotics, basic supportive care." "What?" Instead of answering, Dr. Kim led him to the observation window. What Marcus saw on the other side made him question whether he was still dreaming. The creature was not only alive, it was thriving. The metallic plates that covered its body now gleamed with an inner light, shifting through a spectrum of colors that seemed to respond to its movements. The bioluminescent organs along its spine pulsed in complex patterns, creating what looked almost like written language in light. But most striking of all was what surrounded the being. The entire floor of the enclosure had been transformed. What yesterday had been simple sand was now covered in intricate geometric patterns, carved with mathematical precision. The designs weren't random. They formed interconnected spirals and angular structures that spoke of advanced engineering and artistic sensibility. At the center of it all sat the creature, its 6 limbs moving in careful, deliberate motions as it continued to modify its creation. "How long has it been doing this?" Marcus asked. "We first noticed activity around 0400 hours, Dr. Kim replied. "But I suspect it started much earlier. Look at the complexity of those patterns. This would have taken hours to complete, and it's still working." As they watched, the creature paused in its construction and turned toward the observation window. When it saw Marcus, it made a series of sounds that were clearly different from the previous day's distressed moaning. These were structured, purposeful, almost song-like in their complexity. The being raised one of its limbs toward the glass in what was unmistakably a greeting. "It recognizes you," breathed Dr. Kim. "Marcus, do you understand what this means? This isn't just some animal that got sick. This is a sapient being with advanced cognitive abilities, and it's trying to communicate with us." Sergeant Rodriguez approached from behind them. "Doc, we've been monitoring its vital signs all night. Whatever you did yesterday, it worked better than anyone could have hoped. All signs of infection are gone, body temperature is stable, and its brain activity." He paused, consulting his tablet. "Well, let's just say it's showing patterns we've never seen before." Marcus stared at the creature, his medical mind trying to process what he was seeing. "What kind of patterns?" "Complex neural cascades, synchronized across multiple brain regions. Dr. Kim thinks it might be attempting some form of technological interface." As if responding to their conversation, the creature moved to one section of its sand sculpture and began manipulating the patterns with renewed intensity. The designs seemed to shift and flow under its touch, forming new configurations that hurt to look at directly. The bioluminescent organs along its spine began pulsing in harmony with its movements, creating a light show that was both beautiful and deeply alien. "I need to go in there again," Marcus said. "Absolutely not," Rodriguez responded immediately. "Yesterday was an emergency medical situation. Now we're dealing with an unknown intelligence that's demonstrating capabilities we don't understand. This is way above our clearance level." "Sergeant's right," Dr. Kim added. "We need to contact the Colonial Authority, get a proper xenopsychology team out here. This could be one of the most significant first contact scenarios in human history." Marcus watched as the creature continued its work, those intelligent eyes occasionally glancing toward the observation window. There was something in that gaze, not just awareness but expectation, as if the being was waiting for something or someone. "How long until a xenopsychology team can get here?" he asked. "Doktor Kim konsultet her tablet. Best case scenario, 3 weeks, assuming the authority fast-tracks the request. More likely 6 to 8 weeks. And in the meantime, we just keep it locked up while it tries to communicate with us through interpretive sand art." "Marcus, I understand your concern, but we have to follow protocols. This being could possess technologies or knowledge far beyond our current understanding. We can't risk." Dr. Kim was interrupted by an urgent beeping from the monitoring station. The technician manning the sensors looked up with alarm. "Dr. Kim, we're seeing massive changes in the creature's neural activity. And something else, it's generating some kind of electromagnetic field." All eyes turned back to the observation window. The creature had stopped its work and was now positioned at the center of its geometric creation. Its bioluminescent organs were pulsing in perfect synchronization, and the metallic plates covering its body were beginning to resonate with a low, harmonic frequency that they could feel through the reinforced walls. "Is it dangerous?" Rodriguez asked, his hand moving instinctively to his sidearm. "I don't think so," Dr. Kim replied, her voice filled with wonder. "I think it's trying to show us something." The patterns in the sand began to glow with the same light that emanated from the creature's body. What had appeared to be simple geometric designs now revealed themselves as three-dimensional holographic projections, rising from the sand like ghostly architecture. The images showed structures that were clearly technological, towers that twisted through impossible geometries, vehicles that seemed to move through space without visible propulsion, beings that looked similar to their current subject engaged in activities that spoke of advanced civilization. "My God," whispered Dr. Kim. "It's showing us its home, its people." The holographic display continued for several minutes, showing scene after scene of what could only be described as a highly advanced society. Cities that floated among the clouds, energy sources that defied current human understanding, art forms that existed in 4 dimensions. And throughout it all, beings like their patient, intelligent, cooperative, working together in harmony. Then, the display changed. The peaceful scenes were replaced by images of destruction, cities burning, the sky filled with ships engaged in devastating combat, landscapes scarred by weapons of unimaginable power. the creature's own kind fleeing in massive refugee vessels, seeking sanctuary among the stars. The holographic images faded, leaving the creature sitting alone in its enclosure. But now its posture seemed different, more dignified, more purposeful. It looked directly at Marcus through the observation window and made a single, clear vocalization that somehow conveyed both gratitude and urgent necessity. "The HFY War," Dr. Kim said quietly. "It's a refugee, just like all the others. But its people, they weren't just caught in the conflict. They were on the losing side." Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. What species was it that the hegemony forces were trying to eliminate? The ones that supposedly had technology that could turn the tide of the war. Dr. Kim's face went pale. The architects. They call them the architects because they could manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level. Intelligence reports said they were all wiped out in the final phase of the conflict. Apparently not all of them, Rodriguez observed grimly. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd saved the life of one of the most wanted beings in the galaxy, a member of a species that the hegemony had tried to commit genocide against because of their technological capabilities. And now that being was trying to communicate with them, showing them glimpses of knowledge that could revolutionize human civilization. "We need to make a decision," Marcus said. "Do we follow protocol and wait for the experts? Or do we recognize that we're already in uncharted territory?" Before anyone could answer, their comm units began buzzing with incoming messages. Rodriguez checked his first, and his expression turned grim. "Hegemony patrol ships just entered the system," he announced. "They're requesting permission to conduct standard refugee verification procedures in our camp." The creature in the enclosure seemed to sense the change in mood. Its bioluminescent organs shifted from peaceful blue to urgent red, and it began making sounds that were unmistakably distressed. The holographic display activated again, but this time it showed only one image: hegemony soldiers executing beings that looked exactly like their patient. "They're not here to verify refugees," Dr. Kim said quietly. "They're here to finish what they started." Marcus looked at the creature through the reinforced glass, seeing not just an alien patient, but a person whose life he'd saved, who was now in mortal danger because of forces beyond anyone's control. The being met his gaze and made a sound that needed no translation. It was asking for help. "How long until the hegemony ships reach the planet?" Marcus asked. Rodriguez consulted his tactical display. 6 hours, maybe 7 if we're lucky. Then, we have 6 hours to figure out how to save a being that shouldn't exist, using knowledge that could change the course of human history. Marcus squared his shoulders, his decision made. "I'm going back in there. If that creature wants to communicate, then I'm going to listen." "Marcus, you can't," Dr. Kim began. "Yesterday I treated a patient," Marcus interrupted. "Today I'm talking to a person. Tomorrow, if we're very lucky and very smart, maybe we'll all still be alive to see what comes next." As he walked toward the airlock, Marcus could hear the heated discussion continuing behind him. But his focus was entirely on the being waiting in the enclosure. An architect, one of the last of its kind, who had chosen to trust a human medic with the secrets of its species. The question was whether humanity was ready for what it was about to learn. The airlock cycled with agonizing slowness as Marcus prepared himself for what might be the most important conversation in human history. Behind him, he could hear the muffled voices of Rodriguez and Dr. Kim arguing about protocol and chain of command, but their words seemed distant and unreal. The only thing that mattered now was the being waiting in the enclosure and the hegemony ships that were drawing closer with each passing minute. As the inner door opened, Marcus was immediately struck by how different the environment felt. Yesterday, the enclosure had reeked of sickness and desperation. Now, it hummed with energy, not just the electromagnetic field that the monitors had detected, but something deeper, more fundamental. The air itself seemed to vibrate with possibility. The creature, the architect, Marcus reminded himself, was positioned at the center of its sand creation, but Now the geometric patterns extended up the walls and even across the ceiling. The entire space had been transformed into a three-dimensional mandala that seemed to pulse with its own life. As Marcus entered, the being raised what he now recognized as its primary manipulator appendage in greeting. "Hello," Marcus said, feeling somewhat foolish for addressing the being in English. "I'm not sure if you can understand me, but I want to help." The architect tilted its head in a gesture that was startlingly human-like, then began to vocalize. But these weren't the random sounds Marcus had heard before. There's structure here, rhythm, intentionality. The being was clearly trying to communicate, but in a language that predated human civilization by eons. Marcus activated his portable translator, though he held little hope that it would be effective. The device had been designed to handle the various trade languages that had emerged during humanity's expansion into space, not the communication systems of a species that manipulated matter at the quantum level. To his surprise, the translator began producing fragments of meaning. Not full translations, but concepts that seemed to bridge the gap between human understanding and architect thought. Gratitude, healing, danger, time, choice. The architect seemed to notice the device's partial success, because it immediately began modifying its vocalizations, simplifying them, repeating certain patterns until the translator could build a more complete understanding. It was learning the limits of human technology in real time and adapting its communication accordingly. Gratitude for healing came the clearer translation. Danger approaches. Time is limited. Choice must be made. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. The being knew about the hegemony ships. "You're aware of what's coming?" The architect gestured to the patterns surrounding them. And suddenly, Marcus realized that the geometric designs weren't just art. They were a functional interface. The being's manipulator appendages moved across specific sections of the pattern, and holographic displays began materializing in the air between them. The images showed the approaching hegemony fleet in precise detail. Ship configurations, weapons arrays, troop deployments. But, more than that, they showed the fleet's intended actions. Orbital bombardment of the refugee camp. Systematic execution of any survivors. Complete sterilization of the site to ensure that no trace of architect presence remained. "How can you know this?" Marcus asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. "Architect perception transcends three-dimensional space," the translator rendered. "Quantum consciousness allows observation of probability streams. Hegemony intentions are clear across all possible futures." Marcus felt the weight of the situation crushing down on him. "Then, we can't stop them. Our defensive capabilities are minimal. We have maybe a few hundred troops against a full battle fleet." The architect's bioluminescent organs pulsed in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as the equivalent of a human nod. But then the being began manipulating its sand interface again, and new images appeared, schematics of human ships and weapons, technical diagrams that showed modifications that Marcus's engineering mind couldn't begin to comprehend. Architect technology can enhance human capabilities, the translation continued. But choice must be made. Integration requires trust. Once begun, cannot be undone. "What kind of integration?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew what the architect was offering. The holographic displays shifted, showing human vessels equipped with technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Ships that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that could target enemies across vast distances by manipulating quantum entanglement. Defensive systems that could render entire fleets invisible to conventional sensors. But the images also showed the cost. Human crews working alongside architect technology, their neural patterns slowly adapting to interface with quantum-based systems. Not domination or conquest, but genuine partnership between two species with radically different approaches to understanding the universe. "You're offering us your technology," Marcus said slowly. "In exchange for what?" "Survival," came the simple reply. "Architect race nearly extinct. Human race possesses qualities architects lack: adaptability, resilience, capacity for rapid evolution. Partnership offers survival for both species. Marcus thought about the implications. The hegemony had tried to wipe out the architects precisely because they feared this kind of technological advancement. If humanity allied with the survivors, they would become targets for the same genocidal campaign that had nearly destroyed the architect's civilization. The hegemony will never stop hunting us if we accept this partnership, Marcus said. The architect's response was immediate. Hegemony will hunt humanity regardless. Human expansion threatens hegemony control. Current refugee camp is test. Hegemony seeks excuse for aggression. Partnership with architects offers only chance for human survival. The brutal logic of it hit Marcus like a physical blow. The hegemony wasn't here just to eliminate the last of the architects. They were here to gauge human response, to find justification for adding humanity to their list of species marked for extinction. Whether the humans helped the architect or not, they were already doomed. "How much time do we have?" he asked. The architect manipulated its interface, and a countdown appeared in the air between them. 3 hours, 47 minutes. Integration process requires approximately 2 hours. The translation continued. Human neural adaptation to architect technology can be accelerated, but requires willing participation. Cannot be forced. Marcus felt the crushing weight of decision settling on his shoulders. He was a medic, trained to save lives, not to make choices that could determine the fate of his entire species. But the circumstances had thrust him into a position where his next words might determine whether humanity survived the next few hours. "What would you need from us?" he asked. The architect's reply came with startling specificity. Access to human communication networks. 12 volunteers with compatible neural patterns for initial integration. Physical contact with human technology to enable quantum interface. 12 people, Marcus repeated, to integrate with technology we don't understand, in a process that can't be undone, to fight an enemy that outguns us 1,000 to 1. Correct assessment, the architect confirmed. Alternative is extinction within 4 hours. Marcus closed his eyes, thinking of the hundreds of refugees in the camp, the human peacekeepers who had volunteered to protect them, the representatives of dozens of species who had fled here, seeking sanctuary. All of them depending on decisions being made in a converted cargo container by a species that shouldn't exist, and a medic who was way out of his depth. If we do this, Marcus said slowly, what happens to the people who integrate? Do they remain human? Human consciousness remains intact, the architect replied. Enhanced, not replaced. Think of it as symbiosis rather than assimilation. The holographic displays shifted again, showing Marcus himself connected to the architect's quantum interface. His human mind expanded to perceive dimensions of reality that his species had never imagined. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "I need to discuss this with my people," Marcus said. "Time remains limited," the architect warned. Hegemony ships, accelerating approach vector. Decision window closing. Marcus nodded and turned toward the airlock, but the architect's next words stopped him cold. "Medic Marcus, regardless of human choice, gratitude remains absolute. First time in 3 cycles that architect individual has experienced kindness from unknown species. This act of healing has meaning beyond survival." Marcus looked back at the being that had chosen to trust him with the secrets of its civilization. "You don't have to thank me. It's what we do. Precisely why partnership offers hope," the architect replied. Hegemony believes universe should be ordered, controlled, purified. Humans believe universe should be healed. This fundamental difference suggests possibility of better future. As Marcus left the enclosure, his mind was already racing through the logistics of what needed to happen next. He had to convince Rodriguez to violate direct orders from Colonial Command. He had to find 12 volunteers willing to risk their humanity to save their species. And he had to do it all while hegemony ships closed in on their position. But for the first time since the crisis had begun, Marcus felt something that had been absent from his thinking. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone grasping at straws, but the clear-eyed hope of someone who had seen a path forward, however dangerous it might be. The architect had offered humanity a choice between extinction and evolution. Now, it was up to Marcus to convince his species to take the leap into the unknown, trusting that the being he'd saved with human medicine might be able to save humanity in return. The countdown in his head seemed to tick louder with each step as he walked back toward the observation post, knowing that the next conversation would determine whether this refugee camp became the site of humanity's extinction or the birthplace of something unprecedented in galactic history. The observation post had transformed into a command center during Marcus's absence. Banks of monitors showed tactical displays of the approaching hegemony fleet, while communication officers worked frantically to coordinate with other human outposts in the system. The urgency in the air was palpable, but Marcus could see from the grim expressions around him that the situation was hopeless by conventional military standards. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Marcus called out as he entered. "I need to speak with you immediately. All senior staff." Rodriguez looked up from a tactical display showing fleet positions. "Doc, whatever you learned in there is going to have to wait. We've got bigger problems. The hegemony fleet isn't just conducting verification procedures. They're positioning for orbital bombardment. We've got maybe 3 hours before they're in firing position." "That's exactly what I need to talk to you about," Marcus insisted. "The architect, it knows what's coming, and it's offered us a way to fight back." Dr. Kim stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "Marcus, I've been analyzing the creature's neural patterns while you were inside. The complexity of its thought processes is beyond anything we've encountered. If it's offering help, we need to listen." "With respect, Doctor," interrupted Colonel Hayes, the camp's commanding officer who had just arrived from the main command center, "I'm not about to base military strategy on communications with an unknown alien entity. We're dealing with a hegemony battle fleet, not some academic exercise." Marcus pulled out his portable display and activated the tactical information the architect had shared with him. The holographic projections filled the center of the room, showing the hegemony fleet's exact positions, weapons configurations, and battle plans in startling detail. The room fell silent as the officers absorbed what they were seeing. The intelligence was impossibly precise, showing not just the current positions of enemy ships, but their intended movements, target priorities, and even the timing of their attacks. "How did you get this?" Colonel est demandé. "The architect can perceive multiple probability streams simultaneously," Marcus explained. "It's showing us the enemy's plans because it wants to help us survive. But there's a cost." He activated the next set of displays, showing the technological integration process that the architect had demonstrated. The room watched in fascination and horror as the holographic images showed human volunteers connecting their neural systems to alien technology, their consciousness expanding to interface with quantum-based systems. "Absolutely not," Colonel Hayes said immediately. "I'm not authorizing human experimentation with unknown alien technology in the middle of a combat situation." "Sir, with respect," Rodriguez interjected, "what alternative do we have?" The tactical display shows 7 hegemony dreadnoughts and a full support fleet. "We have 2 outdated frigates and a handful of patrol boats. Without some kind of force multiplier, we're not just facing defeat, we're facing extinction." Dr. Kim was studying the integration displays with scientific fascination. "Marcus, did the being explain what happens to human consciousness during this process? Are we talking about temporary enhancement or permanent alteration?" "Permanent, Marcus admitted." But the architect was clear that human consciousness remains intact. "It's more like adding new capabilities than replacing existing ones." "And if something goes wrong?" "Colonel est pressed." Marcus met his commanding officer's gaze steadily. "Then 12 people die instead of 12,000. The brutal mathematics of the situation hung in the air like a physical presence. Around the room, Marcus could see the other officers grappling with the same impossible calculus. The rational choice was obvious, but the human cost was staggering. "Even if we accept this proposal," Dr. Kim said slowly, "how do we select volunteers? What kind of neural compatibility are we looking for?" Marcus activated another set of displays from the architect's briefing. The being provided specific criteria, high spatial reasoning, adaptability to sensory input changes, and what it calls quantum consciousness potential, whatever that means. "I know what it means," said a new voice from the doorway. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Torres, the expedition's chief engineer, stepped into the room. "I've been reviewing the technical specifications your architect friend transmitted to our computer systems. Quantum consciousness potential refers to the ability to process information across multiple dimensional frameworks simultaneously. The architect has been in our computer systems?" Colonel Hayes asked with alarm. "With surgical precision," Torres confirmed. "It hasn't accessed any classified data or weapon systems. Instead, it's been analyzing our neural interface technology, medical records, and psychometric evaluations. It's building a compatibility matrix for the integration process." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. "It's been planning this since yesterday. Probably since the moment I treated it." Torres nodded. "The compatibility analysis is complete. 12 individuals in our camp have the neural architecture necessary for successful integration. 3 of them are in this room right now." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could see the weight of realization settling on his colleagues as they understood that this wasn't just an abstract discussion about theoretical volunteers. Some of them would be the ones asked to sacrifice their humanity to save their species. "Who are the candidates?" Dr. Kim asked quietly. Torres consulted her tablet. "Dr. Kim, you're at the top of the list. Your background in xenobiology and neural adaptation studies makes you an ideal candidate. Corporal Chun is second. His medical training and proven ability to work with alien physiology under stress are significant factors." Marcus felt his stomach drop as Torres continued reading names. Rodriguez made the list, as did 3 other medical personnel and a handful of the camp's most experienced engineers and pilots. Each name represented someone he knew personally, someone whose life would be forever changed if they accepted the architect's offer. "We need to make a decision," Colonel Hayes said grimly. "The hegemony fleet will be in attack position in 2 hours and 40 minutes. If we're going to do this, we need to start the process now." "Sir," Marcus said, "I volunteered to go first." "Absolutely not," Rodriguez interjected. "You're our only link to the architect. If something goes wrong during your integration, we lose our ability to communicate with our potential ally." Dr. Kim stepped forward. "I'll go first. My background gives me the best chance of understanding what's happening during the process and guiding the others through it." "Sarah, you can't," Marcus began. "Yes, I can," she said firmly. "This is the most significant xenobiological discovery in human history. If there's a chance that sharing consciousness with an architect can help our species survive, then I have an obligation to pursue it." Colonel Hayes looked around the room at the faces of his officers, seeing the same grim determination reflected in each of them. "All right, I'm authorizing the integration protocol. Volunteers only, full informed consent. Dr. Kim takes point, with Corporal Chun providing medical oversight." "What about the rest of the camp?" Rodriguez asked. "Do we tell them what's happening?" "We tell them we're implementing an experimental defense protocol," Hayes decided. "Full disclosure comes after we know whether this actually works. If it doesn't, there's no point in causing panic during our last few hours." Torres activated her communication link to the architect's enclosure. "Commander Torres to Architect Entity. We're ready to begin integration protocol. Please provide specific instructions for the first volunteer." The response came back immediately, translated by the improved communication interface the architect had established. "Architect acknowledges human decision. Integration, chamber preparation beginning now. First volunteer should report to enclosure immediately." As Dr. Kim gathered her equipment and prepared for what might be the most important scientific experiment in human history, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He'd saved the architect's life with human medicine, and now that being was offering to save humanity with technology beyond their comprehension. "Sarah," he called out as she reached the door. "When you're in there, remember that the architect isn't just an alien entity. It's a person who's lost everything and is trying to prevent the same thing from happening to us. She nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and excitement. I'll try to keep that in mind when my consciousness is being rewired by quantum technology. As Dr. Kim left for the integration chamber, Marcus turned his attention to the tactical displays showing the approaching hegemony fleet. In less than 3 hours, they would know whether humanity's first attempt at technological symbiosis with an alien species would result in their salvation or their extinction. The irony wasn't lost on him that the fate of human civilization now rested on a medical intervention he'd performed with basic antibiotics and saline solution. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion had consequences that rippled across the galaxy in ways no one could predict. Outside, the alien sun was beginning to set over the refugee camp, casting long shadows across the makeshift shelters that housed thousands of beings from across the galaxy. All of them were counting on decisions being made in a converted cargo container, where a human xenobiologist was about to volunteer her consciousness to an alien intelligence in the desperate hope of preventing genocide. Marcus checked his chronometer. 2 hours and 36 minutes until the hegemony fleet reached firing position. Assuming the integration process worked as advertised, they would have less than 30 minutes to test their new capabilities before facing the most advanced military force in the galaxy. It was going to be the longest 2.5 hours of his life. The integration chamber hummed with energy that seemed to bypass Marcus's ears and resonate directly in his bones. Dr. Kim had been connected to the architect's quantum interface for 47 minutes, and the changes were already visible. Her body remained motionless on the bio bed, but the neural activity monitors showed patterns that defied every known model of human brain function. Her consciousness is operating across 17 different dimensional frameworks simultaneously, reported Torres, her voice filled with scientific wonder and barely contained terror. The quantum resonance patterns suggest she's accessing information streams that exist outside normal space-time. Marcus watched the readouts with growing anxiety. Kim's vital signs were stable, but the person lying on that bio bed was no longer entirely human. The question was whether enough of her humanity remained to bridge the gap between species. 53 minutes. The architect communicated through the interface it had established with their computer systems. Integration approaching completion. Dr. Kim consciousness adapting successfully to quantum perception matrix. Can she hear us? Marcus asked. Dr. Kim consciousness exists in multiple states simultaneously. Awareness of local environment maintained alongside expanded perception capabilities. Before Marcus could respond, Kim's eyes opened. But they weren't the brown eyes he'd known for 3 years of military service together. Instead, they held depth that seemed infinite, as if she was seeing through dimensions of reality that human vision had never been designed to perceive. Marcus, she said, and her voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before. I can see everything. The hegemony fleet, their weapons, their plans. But more than that, I can see the quantum threads that connect all matter in this system. Are you still you? Marcus asked, the question that everyone in the room was afraid to voice. Kim's smile was entirely human, despite the alien depth in her eyes. I'm still me. Enhanced, expanded, but fundamentally still Dr. Sarah Kim. The architect wasn't lying about preserving human consciousness. If anything, I feel more myself than I ever have before. She sat up on the bio bed, moving with fluid grace that spoke of perfect awareness of her body's position in three-dimensional space. We need to accelerate the integration process for the other volunteers. The hegemony fleet has changed course. They're moving to attack position earlier than expected. Marcus felt his heart sink. How much time do we have? 96 minutes until they reach optimal firing position, Kim replied, her voice taking on the same harmonic quality as the architect's communication. But that's enough time if we parallelize the integration process. Is that safe? Torres asked. Kim consulted information streams that existed beyond normal human perception. The architect has modified its consciousness matrix to accommodate multiple simultaneous integrations. Risk factors are minimal, and the alternative is extinction. Colonel Hayes activated the camp-wide communication system. All integration volunteers report to Sector 7 immediately. This is not a drill. Over the next hour, Marcus watched as 11 more human beings voluntarily surrendered their individual consciousness to join the expanding quantum awareness that the architect had created. Each integration followed the same pattern: initial disorientation, followed by a period of consciousness expansion, then emergence with capabilities that transformed their understanding of reality itself. Lieutenant Rodriguez was the third to complete integration, and his first action was to access the camp's defensive systems with a thought. "I can see the quantum signatures of every weapons system in the hegemony fleet," he reported. "Their shielding technology operates on principles we can counter with the right modifications." Engineer Torres integrated next, and immediately began modifying human technology with capabilities that shouldn't have been possible. Ships that had been designed for atmospheric flight were suddenly capable of existing in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. Weapons that had been limited to conventional physics were enhanced with quantum targeting systems that could track enemies across interstellar distances. But it was when Marcus himself underwent integration that the true scope of what they were attempting became clear. As his consciousness expanded to encompass quantum awareness, he found himself in direct communication with the architect's core intelligence, not through translation devices or holographic interfaces, but through direct transfer of concepts and emotions. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus asked, his thoughts transmitted across dimensional boundaries. "You could have waited for another opportunity to rebuild your civilization. Instead, you're risking everything to help a species you barely know." The architect's response came layered with memories and emotions that predated human evolution. Architect's civilization fell because we pursued knowledge in isolation. We became so focused on understanding the universe that we forgot to connect with the other beings who shared it. When the hegemony came, we had no allies, no friends willing to stand with us against extinction. But humanity is different. Humanity heals, the architect replied, and Marcus felt the depth of gratitude that had motivated its decision to offer partnership. "When you found me dying, you did not analyze the strategic implications of my survival. You did not calculate the potential benefits of preserving my life. You simply saw a being in pain and chose to help. This instinct for compassion is what architect's civilization lacked." Marcus felt the truth of that statement resonating through the shared consciousness. The architect wasn't just offering humans its technology. It was offering its species a chance at redemption, an opportunity to prove that knowledge without compassion was worthless, but knowledge combined with human empathy might be capable of transforming the galaxy. "Integration complete," announced Kim, now serving as the primary interface between human and architect consciousness. "All systems modified and ready for deployment. Hegemony fleet entering optimal attack position in 12 minutes. Marcus opened his eyes in the integration chamber, but his awareness now extended far beyond the converted cargo container. He could perceive the hegemony fleet as clearly as if he were standing on their bridge, could feel the quantum signatures of their weapons charging for the attack that would sterilize the refugee camp and everyone in it. But he could also feel something else, the combined consciousness of 12 humans and one architect, unified in purpose but maintaining their individual identities. They were still themselves, but they were also something more, something that had never existed before in galactic history. "All ships, this is Enhanced Command," Kim transmitted across multiple dimensional frequencies. "Implement quantum defense protocols. Engage hegemony fleet on my mark." What followed could barely be described in terms that normal human consciousness could comprehend. Ships that had been outgunned 1,000 to 1 suddenly possessed capabilities that violated every known principle of physics. Human vessels phased in and out of normal space-time, striking the hegemony fleet from directions that didn't exist in conventional reality. The enhanced pilots didn't just see their enemies. They could perceive the quantum probability threads that determined where those enemies would be, allowing them to target ships across impossible distances with weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Defense systems that should have been overwhelmed by superior firepower instead redirected enemy attacks through quantum tunnels, turning the hegemony fleet's own weapons against them. But most devastating of all was the simple fact that the enhanced humans fought not as individuals seeking personal survival, but as a unified consciousness dedicated to protecting all the beings in their care. The refugees in the camp, regardless of species, were part of their extended family now, and the integrated humans brought to bear capabilities that transcended anything the hegemony had ever encountered. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, the hegemony fleet was either destroyed or fleeing the system, their surviving ships carrying reports of a new kind of warfare that would fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy. Marcus stood in the observation post, his awareness still expanded across multiple dimensional frameworks, and watched as human ships returned to standard orbit around the refugee camp. The beings they had saved, thousands of refugees from dozens of species, would never know how close they had come to extinction, or how their salvation had been purchased with the voluntary transformation of 12 human volunteers. What happens now? Marcus asked, his question directed both to his enhanced colleagues and to the architect consciousness that remained linked to their shared awareness. Now we build, Kim replied, her voice carrying harmonics of hope that resonated across dimensional boundaries. We've proven that human compassion and architect knowledge can coexist. The hegemony will come again, but next time they won't be facing a few modified ships and enhanced pilots. They'll be facing the foundation of something entirely new. Marcus nodded, understanding the implications. The rescue of a dying alien with basic human medicine had become the first step in a partnership that would reshape galactic civilization. The refugee camp would become a beacon for species seeking alternatives to hegemony control. And the 12 volunteers who had sacrificed their individual humanity would become the template for a new kind of consciousness that combined the best aspects of multiple species. Looking out through the observation window, Marcus could see the architect in its enclosure, no longer a patient dying from alien diseases, but a partner in humanity's first steps toward a larger destiny. The being raised one of its manipulator appendages in farewell, but Marcus knew it wasn't really goodbye. Their consciousness were linked now across quantum dimensions, part of a growing network that would eventually span the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on him that saving a single life with antibiotics and saline solution had led to humanity's transformation into something that transcended the limitations of individual species. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion had consequences that rippled across the universe in ways no one could predict. As the sun set over the refugee camp, Marcus reflected on the fact that he was still fundamentally himself, despite the quantum enhancements that allowed him to perceive reality across multiple dimensions. The architect had been right. Human consciousness wasn't replaced by the integration process, just expanded to encompass possibilities that his species had never imagined. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as word of humanity's transformation spread throughout the galaxy. Some species would seek partnership, others would view them as a threat. But tonight, thousands of beings slept safely because a human medic had chosen to help a dying stranger, and that stranger had repaid the kindness by offering humanity the tools they needed to protect themselves and others. In the end, that was what made humans special in a galaxy dominated by conflict and conquest. They healed, they helped, and they never forgot that behind every alien appearance was a person deserving of compassion. It was a simple philosophy, but one that had just changed the course of galactic history. The age of enhancement had begun, built on a foundation of human medicine and alien gratitude, and it would never end.